MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down Michigan football as the Wolverines prepare for what should have been a showdown against Penn State, but both teams off the rails at this point of the 2020 season. We got Justin Rowe on the line as we bring in Justin each and every week from his podcast Stadium in Maine to discuss Michigan football, and we're going to really zero in on one facet of the Wolverines' decline this season and depending on your vantage point the last few years. Justin, how you doing today?
Doing well over here. It's getting, not so great weather in Ann Arbor here, but we've had a pretty good fall. So I'm happy about it. And you know what? If you're sick of Michigan football by now, which I know a lot of people are, Michigan basketball starts today. So there's something to turn your eyes to, but we'll keep plugging along here with the football team throughout the rest of the season.
And from what I understand, just Jawan Howard bringing in some top-level recruits.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got, in just year two, the #1 recruiting class in the country. So a couple 5 stars. Not bad for the new guy in Ann Arbor.
Justin, if I've never given you this speech before, regardless of the record, regardless of how bad it gets, this is all football, regardless of the team. That's all we talk about here. Even in May, even in March Madness time, it's all football all the time.
All right, no worries. I can talk football anytime, anywhere, so that's fine with me.
All right, Don Brown's defense has been much debated. It's been largely and hugely successful from a numbers standpoint, but it has to be taken into context. Now, Jim Harbaugh showed up in 2015. Don Brown 1 year later in 2016, the most successful of Michigan's seasons from start to finish. By many measurements. Give us some context to Don Brown's performance with this Michigan defense.
Well, I think when you look at what Don Brown has done, like you said, from a numbers perspective, they've been up until this year in the top 10 as far as statistical categories, a lot of total yardage, total points, all that stuff. They've really been a top 10 program. But I'd say if you're watching Michigan football week in and week out and take a look at what he's done, he does really, really well against the bottom tier teams in the Big Ten and their non-conference games, of course, the cupcakes at the beginning of the schedule. So when he does get to an elite team like an Ohio State, like a Penn State, even a Wisconsin, they seem to really be able to open it up against Michigan and exploit some of Don's tendencies and his schemes. And so one big thing, obviously the big team for Michigan to play every year is Ohio State. And the last couple of years, they've given up a lot of points. So 62 points in 2018 when they were they were both top 5 teams, and Michigan had a chance to win that game and go to the Big Ten title. I believe they had 50-some last year. So it really is. That's what I think most fans and most people have a problem with Don Brown, is that he can do everything against mediocre teams or even just a little above average teams. But then when he runs into Wisconsin with Jonathan Taylor, or even Wisconsin a couple weeks ago with Graham Mertz in a solid running game, and he gives up 350 yards rushing. So I think when you look at it, Don Brown's defense is really one-dimensional. He hasn't been able to adjust. I think that's most people's problem, is that when he gets into a game and things start not going well for them, he's not able to go into halftime or even the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter and adjust and say, hey, they're exploiting us in this. Let's make this adjustment, and then we'll stop that. He really just kind of sticks to his guns, and that's what causes 350 rushing yards, or even to Rutgers, they gave up 370 passing yards. So that's kind of what you're looking at with Don Brown right now.
So I'm going to take this argument to the other end of the spectrum and give an example of what might be an issue going to the opposite approach when it's not needed. In 2017 and 18, particularly in 18, that Ohio State team that beat Michigan, they played awful defense for about 10 weeks. And the thought process was, we've got better athletes than everybody else. Why are they playing such a complicated defense? Greg Schiano was in charge of the defense. They bring in Alex Grinch. So they've got these tremendous defensive minds on the coaching staff, but maybe one dynamic was that they didn't meld together their philosophies, and there was a bit of a power struggle there. And on top of it, the criticism was Greg Schiano just came from an NFL job, and he's expecting these kids to understand all these exotic defenses when they don't need to play them. Flip that to the Don Brown model, where, correct me in any way that I state this that is not accurate, he relies on the athleticism of Michigan and the superior athleticism in most games to play man-to-man and say, pass rushers, go get the quarterback. In the meantime, we can lock in on our receivers. And the simplicity of that is great in that there's largely not going to be much confusion in regards to communication and coverages, because there's not a whole lot to know. That's your guy, that's my guy, that's your guy. And let's go and let's stick to our man. But I would think there's a few issues with that. You pointed out the first one. When you go against not even better talent, like talent, the receiver has such an advantage over the defensive back. Decent receivers are going to occasionally burn the best cornerbacks in the country if the quarterback has enough time to throw the ball downfield, because it's just a position that is so difficult to play with all that green grass and all that space out there and that speed and athleticism. And the wide receiver always knows where they're going. The DB doesn't know where they're going. It's just a difficult position to play man-to-man. And then just on top of that, the sophistication of the passing offense and the level of play of these quarterbacks and receivers now versus what we saw 15 or 20 years ago. Heck, I watched for 5 minutes last night the 1981 Sugar Bowl, which I'm old enough that I watched it live at the time. I watched like 5 minutes. I was flipping by the SEC network, Georgia, Notre Dame. And it's just comical to a certain extent, even though I have great respect for those players in that era, to listen to the announcers talk about quarterbacks and wide receivers throwing and catching the ball, because they're astounded by what we consider to be routine catches now. They've become so good at the high school level of developing these quarterbacks and wide receivers. Once they hit a college field, they are just so good. They can throw it so much better than they could years ago and put it where they want. That they also and with that, skill development physically has come mental development in understanding the defense. So I think you can err in the Greg Schiano way to give the kids too much to memorize and think about out there, but you can be too simplistic when knowing these quarterbacks and these wide receivers have had so many reps that if they can just see this vanilla defense and know what it's going to be every snap, you need to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only are the quarterbacks are so much smarter, like you just said, about, calling audibles and seeing the reads, going to their second and third reads, where probably in 1980, not even then, in 2005, guys were only sticking with their one read. I think back to Michigan as far as, Braylon Edwards. How many times did they have one read in Braylon Edwards and Chad Henne was going there no matter what, because Braylon was better than the guy that was on him, and that was it. Nowadays, if you don't have that, you can now, these quarterbacks are good enough mentally to go to that second and third read, and they have enough athletes at the second and third wide receiver positions too. And so, yeah, I think that's where, when you're looking at Don Brown, he has been blessed with unbelievable talent on his defense, from the front seven to the back secondary as well. You look at Jordan Lewis and Lavert Hill, who are both in the NFL right now. If you go back and look at their stats, they were unbelievable on defense and they were locked down. So he was able to put them one-on-one with even the best receivers on the other side of the ball, and they could do it for the most part. And then in terms of, as you said, getting to the quarterback, when you have Chase Winovich, Josh Uche, you have Devin Bush flying to the ball, and you are just, interrupting that quarterback's rhythm every single play, then it really makes a difference for that quarterback to get the ball out to his receivers on time. But what we've seen in the past years is that when you have a good offensive line, they can handle that. And then if the quarterback is comfortable against Don Brown's defense, he usually has time to get to his receivers because it's one-on-one coverage on the back end. But now, even this year, Michigan State figured it out. Indiana figured it out. Wisconsin figured it out that if you just pretty much max protect against Don Brown's defense and don't let their blitzers get to the quarterback, you're going to have enough time then for somebody to get open back there because it's mainly one-on-one coverage. And then obviously they've tried to go to the zone a little bit as well, and they just weren't prepared. I don't believe that they have practiced that much in ever from when Don Brown got here in 2016. So, I think that's a really good take as far as the simplicity versus, the Greg Schiano style of the NFL. Maybe Don Brown is too simple, and it's not only easy for the quarterback to figure it out at the line of scrimmage, but then when you're looking at Ryan Day and all these guys that are real, football offensive geniuses, really, they're going to be able to see that whether they're up in the booth or on the field, in the first quarter, and then make adjustments. And that's where you're really going to be able to exploit Don Brown's defense throughout the rest of the game.
One thing we've talked about, Justin, throughout the weeks is that as we peel back another week of results around the Big Ten, we not only see Michigan's deficiencies against whatever opponent that week, whether it be even in a win like against Rutgers, but we see in adding up other results that it doesn't look good on Michigan. And you bring up the Michigan State game and Rocky Lombardi just having a field day, bombing away. And then they face Iowa and Indiana the next 2 weeks, and they score a touchdown in a 49-7 game. So that was meaningless, and they get shut out 24-0. I think there are two marks. There are several marks to any good coach, but I'll bring up two, and especially to a coordinator. One would be, I think it's a good thing to have a foundation, to have a philosophy of this is the best way to do offense or defense. This is what I prefer because I believe it works. I believe in this system. I believe in this approach. Okay, so we'll start there. But you also have to have the adaptability to say, okay, for this particular season with this particular team, maybe because of these particular injuries or these particular opponents, we're going to need to go slightly in this direction or that direction. Even though this is still my belief in the best way to play defense, we need to be able to adjust. And I think both of those marks are the marks of a good coach, that they have a foundation of what they believe in, but then they can also adapt.
Yeah, to me, I've watched a lot of Michigan football over the last 4 years with Don Brown, and I've watched every game, watched it 2-3 times, breaking down film and everything like that. It just doesn't seem like Don Brown has a plan B to me. It really doesn't. It seems like he does not go into a game with any, second, third, fourth plan. It doesn't look like he has a chance to adjust or even has that in his mind, which it blows my mind to even think about that. As a game planner, you have to be able to be ready for anything that's thrown at you and be able to adjust it in game. And honestly, what I thought during the 2016, 17, and 18 years was that Don Brown was really good at going. Michigan would struggle in the first half. They'd get some plays drawn up against them that they hadn't seen before, and they wouldn't do so well. And then he'd go into halftime, adjust, and be really good in that second half. And Michigan would come out and do better. And I just have not seen that. And so in 2019 and 2020. And one thing that I think could be a big part of that is Greg Madison. Greg Madison, after the 2018 season, left for Ohio State to be there. He was the D-line coach at Michigan, and now he's the D-line coach plus co-D coordinator at Ohio State. I think that, especially for the run game, he was a huge part of that. And you can see that in the development of the Ohio State guys. You can see that in the lack of development in the Michigan defensive line. That is the one spot where obviously you have Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson struggling right now because they're hurt and the rest of the D-line is struggling because those are, two future NFL guys that they're missing. But still, you have not many guys on the interior that are really playing well. And so, the whole adjusting part, I mean, it's kind of overplayed a little bit at this point because we've said it each and every week and you still don't see it. But when, like you said, when Rocky Lombardi is throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions 1 week, and then a week and a half later he's benched, that's got to say something about what you've got going on with your defense. And so I'll rattle off, Michigan State, 27 points against Michigan. That's the most they've scored in a season this year. Indiana, 38 points against Michigan, most they've scored. Rutgers, 42 points, most they've scored. Wisconsin, 49 points, most they've scored this season. So when every week the offense that you're going against is putting up their season high, what does that say? That says that you either don't have the athletes, you haven't developed your guys to be good enough to play ball with all these Big Ten teams, or your schemes have either been figured out or never worked in the first place. I think that after 4 years in the Big Ten, pretty much everyone's figured out Don Brown's defense. They look at the Ohio State games. They look at even Indiana when they've gone up against Michigan and Wisconsin. They've exploited certain things, and Don Brown hasn't been able to make an adjustment. And I did want to point out the development as well. I thought that was a really strong point of Don Brown's in the first couple years. Obviously, they weren't all Jim Harbaugh's recruits, so maybe that has something to do with it as well. But when you look at the development of Josh Uche, who went from a guy who nobody had on their radar to now he got drafted and plays for the New England Patriots. Same with Chase Winovich. Same with Devin Bush from his sophomore year to his junior year. There's a lot of guys that really improved under Don Brown, and we haven't seen that in the year 2020. So I think there's something going on, and I think a lot of it is just he's been around Ann Arbor and the Big Ten for 4 years now, and people have kind of figured it out. And then the lack of recruiting in the 2018 and 19 classes have piled on with the lack of development and really made for Don Brown's defense to regress every single year here.
And similar to reviewing and evaluating Jim Harbaugh's performance at Michigan, is he successful? Yes. Based on many criteria, he is successful. Does he know football? Of course he knows football. He's been successful at every stop. But on the flip side, he's being paid at a level to win championships and field teams that are top 3 to 5 in the country, because that's what his salary would indicate. Is he meeting that mark? No. Does Don Brown know what he's doing? Is he a defensive coordinator? Has he done it for years? Does he know football? Of course he does. But he's at Michigan. He should be one of the 10 best at what he's doing in the country. Is he performing at that level now? Of course not. Not in 2020. And it's been deteriorating over the last couple of years. And again, to put the numbers in greater context against the teams that are capable of doing the damage, they have certainly underperformed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that that fans and everyone else takes a look at this defense, takes a look at this program and says, it's Michigan. There's no reason why Michigan shouldn't have a top 5, top 10 defense every single year, right? And Michigan fans will not settle for mediocrity, even though some, might, and you could say maybe they should, because Michigan hasn't been much more than mediocre or average for the past 15 years. But the Michigan fans are not okay with that. And I agree with that. I think that it's a top tier program. It has the best facilities, or one of the best facilities out there. It's obviously the brand name of Michigan in terms of recruiting. They have all the money in the world. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get a guy that can come into Michigan and develop his guys and be successful. And so it's not like they're in the Big 12. They're not going against air raid offenses, and there's college football is moving towards that for sure, even in the SEC, and it's obviously creeping up into the Big 10. But as far as just the offenses that they're going against in the Big Ten, it's not like every week it's a prolific offense. Yes, Penn State can be when they had Saquon Barkley. Yes, Wisconsin with Jonathan Taylor has been. And obviously Ohio State with Justin Fields. And I mean, you can go down the list of quarterbacks and wide receivers that have gone to the NFL there. But I just think that when you're going to expect what you're looking to expect at Michigan, there's no reason for it not to be a top 10 defense. And that's why I think if Jim Harbaugh is taking a look at things this year, Sean Nua, the defensive line coach, and probably Don Brown will be the first ones to go. It'll be interesting to see how loyal and stubborn Jim Harbaugh is. If he is, because it seems like he's got pretty much free reign still, even with the athletic director. But if he sticks with his guns and says, I think Don Brown is the best guy for the job, and I just don't see many people hopping on board with that, and that might be the one thing that takes Jim Harbaugh down.
We hope you enjoy our weekly conversation with Justin Rowe. You can join him on Twitter at JustinRowe92. And please join his podcast, Stadium and Main Podcast. Justin supplies us with great insight into Michigan football here on a weekly basis at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like, comment, share the videos on social media. That way people that don't know that we're here will find us out. And of course, subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live. Justin, appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy your holiday weekend, Thanksgiving, and the football games in play. Noon against Penn State. Both teams in an unfamiliar situation, but that's what it is. At least it'll look, when you turn on the game, you'll see the colors and the uniforms on the screen, and until it checks in that okay, 2-3 against 0-5, it's still okay for a few seconds. Oh, it's Michigan Penn State. This must be a big game.
Yeah. Hey, you know what I'm thinking is, for Michigan fans out there, this is the first time in quite a few years that on Thanksgiving weekend they'll have a chance to beat a team out there. It's usually going up against Ohio State. So let's be thankful that we can gather with friends and family and not be struggling with playing the Scarlet and Gray this weekend.
Justin, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.